All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar using the Falcon SQL editor to generate dashboards in Plotly. We just released this new upgrade to our SQL connector, which allows you to, using a desktop client, connect directly to your SQL databases as various other types of databases, query your data, and bring that data into Plotly. So thank you for joining, and let's begin. So just to note that our next webinar will be on December 6th, and this one will be more based on building online dashboards with Excel. So if you are interested in that, feel free to join our next webinar. And we also have PlotCon coming up November 18th through 19th in New York City. Apologies for the date on the title there, but look at the PlotCon picture. That's the correct dates. It'll be located at King's College in New York, and I hope to see some of you there. And PlotCon will include these master classes in R, Dash, and Plotly.js. So depending on the sort of work that you'll be doing, you may find one of these classes useful. So just to start with a brief introduction of Plotly. Plotly is multifaceted. So at the core of Plotly is the JavaScript library. It's open source, usable any place that uses JavaScript, so web development, etc. And it includes also various tools in the ecosystem that allow more easy use for data scientists. So Plotly API that connects via Python, R, or Matlab, as well as the underlying REST API, and the Plotly web-based ecosystem, which is mainly what we'll be working in today. So this includes anything available at plot.ly, anything that allows you to use the chart workspace, create dashboards, or create Plotly presentations. And Plotly is available on plot.ly, so Plotly Cloud, as well as on an on-premise server. So we do offer enterprise versions of Plotly that companies are able to install behind their firewall. And here, this is just an example of the cloud account options that are available. And if you have any questions about the sorts of accounts that we have or how Plotly could best serve you, feel free to contact Rob Williams from our sales team at rob@plotly, or just visit support.plot.ly. So with that, we'll jump right into the Falcon SQL connector. So Falcon is available for download on the Plotly website. If you're using it in Plotly Cloud, it's just something that you're able to download and run directly from your desktop. So here you could see the various download links, and this is open source, so you're able to see the GitHub repo as well. And this just shows a bit of information about this SQL connector. So without further ado, we'll get into the connector itself. So when you first started out, you're brought to a homepage where you have examples of where you have the various types of databases that you're able to connect to. Mostly databases, a few file systems such as S3, where you're able to connect directly to CSV files. So for this demo, we'll be using PostgreSQL, but just keep in mind that you do have a wide variety of databases, and we are always in the process of expanding this list. So if you're not seeing the particular database that you're using here, feel free to request it on the help page. So I'm just going to use our sample credentials here, but with PostgreSQL, similarly with all of the other databases, should be very straightforward in terms of what needs to be done to connect to your own database. So just entering in your credentials, entering in the host where the database lives, the port that you're connecting with, and the database. So once I enter in all of that information, I'll just click Save Changes, and this automatically connects me to my database. So everything going green and getting no error messages, that means that I have successfully connected to the test PostgreSQL database. So the next step, you can see up here the steps lined in links. The next step is the query sampler. This was the main addition to this new SQL client, the ability to not just preview the data, but also to get visuals along with those previews. So this allows us to select any sort of tables from our database. We have our data sets listed on the left-hand side here, and we're able to also preview the columns. So here, let's take a look at our at Walmart store openings. I'll just drag this over from 1962 to 2006. So to start out, we could just explore the data. So we could just do a very open query, just selecting everything from the table. From. There we go. So once you run the query, you see just a default view of the data down here. And this really allows you to preview the data and do some very quick graphing. So it's not a fully functional chart editor that you would get by going to Plotly, but this allows you to really just explore your queries and kind of decide what you would like to do. So here, by default, it just picks the first two columns, but perhaps we want to look at other columns. So instead of looking at this ID column, we could look at the store openings by state. So I could just choose store state, drag that down here. Try picking another way of looking at this here. So we'll just look at the choropleth map. Again, we'll be looking at store state. We can go back to the original more complex query that I had where we're grouping this by state. So we're looking at total counts of stores rather than just the individual stores themselves. So we could look at this and then pick what we're looking at. So x equals state, y equals value. We have our count, and we just have to reverse these. And count needs to be brought here. And there we have it. So we could see the stores where Walmart is present. and look at the various counts. So again, it's not as fully featured. It's pretty much just something that allows you to drag these different variables to X and Y axes. But you do have a lot of different chart types that you're able to use. And this really, serves as the exploratory sort of experience. So you're able to kind of decide what you would want your query to be before you bring it over to Plotly. So in addition, you do get a table summary. So if you do want to just view the data behind this, you're able to do that. And also you're able to export this. So this export here won't set up a live link. This is just exporting from the tool itself. So either downloading CSV or sending the CSV or chart to Plotly. But just to note that this won't set up the live link. That live link will happen when we go to the next step. So we have our chart here, and I could just go to Plotly to see what my next step is. And this sets up a link that allows you to query directly from Plotly. You also have the option, if you do have Plotly already open, to copy and paste the URL directly into the import dialog. But if I just click on this link, you'll see that a new window will open up and my query will automatically be populated. So this is the same as if I entered the chart editor and clicked on import, but it just brings me to this screen automatically. So you could see that it auto-generates a URL, and I'm able to connect using the import tool. And once I connect, it just shows the default query here, but I could change that however I want. So we could go back to our aggregated query. And then you click run to run your query here. And then given that, we have sort of the similar looking data that we had before. And now we have the full power of the chart editor to create our visualizations. So if we want to create a similar visualization to the one that we were previewing, I could just do this using the full power of Plotly. So I could choose choropleth. I could choose what my location format is, so US state abbreviations. We're looking at the US. And I could choose my locations and values. So store state and count. And then unlike the preview, I'm able to change the styling. So I could go in here and choose how I want to view this. So perhaps I want to change the color scale. I would be able to choose something like this that perhaps matches what I'm working with more clearly. Fix my zoom here, and then the title. And then once I have this, I could save this to my Plotly account. So this should be familiar to anyone who has used the workspace before. You're able to save your files. You could choose how you want to save it, whether you want it to be public, private link, or just totally private. Private files you are able to share using the Plotly share modal, and then public files are publicly available on Plotly. I could just save my data and my graph. Hit save. And now this will be accessible on my files. So if and I'm going to open this in another tab, But if I go back to my files, I'll see my map created, and we'll be able to use this in a sec to create a dashboard. But one thing before we move on to that is to highlight the ability to schedule queries. So the SQL editor allows you to really easily schedule a query. You just tick a box and set how you want to schedule this. So you could run this anywhere from weekly to every minute. So we'll just choose daily here. And then you sync this with the connector. Now, once you do that, this will automatically update on a regular basis. And this means that anything that's tied to this graph will also update. So now when we get into building a dashboard with this, know that this will automatically update. So something like this, if we were tracking every single opening, we would be able to automatically, like just by adding it to the database, have those changes filter into the building. And in terms of creating dashboards, it works exactly the same way as with any other Plotly chart. So you're able to just create a dashboard, be brought to an empty dashboard, and just simply add this from your files. So I could add my map. I could add other graphs from my files. So I could add, what I meant to add that one here. I could remove this one. I could, again, add other plots. Drag and drop in terms of styling. And again, all of this, this is just styling the dashboard, but the link is always going to be maintained. So once I get through all of this styling, adding various text elements, I could add something like this. And once I'm done creating my dashboard, so dragging and dropping, doing the various settings in the layout options here. So I could choose various colors if I wanted to change those, add a logo. I could save my dashboard. And once I do that, and I'm in view mode, so I saved it, and by going over settings, I'm entering view mode. So this is an example of kind of a finished product, what would be shared with other viewers. So if you are creating Plotly dashboards, you would be able to send over a link like this, or just use Plotly's sharing capabilities to share it with another Plotly user. And again, to reiterate, the query that we wrote here, we set that to update daily. So anyone who's viewing this dashboard would view, at the granularity of daily frequency, the most current data. So with that, that pretty much wraps up the overview of using the Falcon SQL editor and how the SQL editor connects to the existing Plotly workflow. So I'm going to go back to our screen here, and apologies for the infinity here, but let me just stop sharing. So do we have any questions? There we go. So I'm just checking the chat here to see if we have any questions. So I see a few votes for Oracle. That actually is, I believe, the next one that's going to be added. And I see a question here. Can we? Are we only able to use tables? Are you able to use? Are you able to use SQL Server views? At the moment, it is only tables that you're able to query. So you're able to use SQL Server views right now. Trying to see. Not sure if Crowdcast is a tech company. And let me just go into the questions here. So I have another question about using the SQL editor to connect to a JSON API. The SQL editor can't connect directly to a JSON API. It's meant to connect to existing databases. So in terms of connecting to a JSON API, you could use our existing APIs through Python, our Matlab, or the REST API. There is also an external data connector. Depending on what the format of the JSON is, it would have to be tabular because this is ultimately going to be a table. So you would be able to use our external API there. Next question that I have is, can we enter other geographic maps as alternatives to the USA and World 1 supplied? At the moment, so we have the, for choropleths, it's only states and countries. But then for either scatter maps or scatter mapbox, which is utilizing the Mapbox API and gives you a tiled Google Map style map, you are able to use those and essentially whatever latitudes and longitudes and shapefiles you want to upload, you are able to do that. In terms of issues of unzipping on Windows, I'm not sure exactly. I'll have to follow up on that. I haven't come across that myself. Mapbox integration, I don't believe it was the default chart types in the Falcon connector, but once you do load the data into Plotly, you're able to use the Mapbox connector. There will be a recording available. So as someone asked if there would be a recording available. And then I see a question, Plotly versus Google Data Studio. The Plotly is more meant for the, just in my experience of using these various tools, Plotly is really built around openness and about, and is really started out on the APIs. So, really kind of has its genesis in the data science workflow. And there's tons of, there are other alternatives, but really I find Plotly's niche is the, just sort of very, a lot of flexibility and the ability to really hook up with the kind of existing open source data science ecosystem. For the specific Oracle question that I see here, when Oracle is supported, will it support TNS names or .ora files? I'm not sure about that, but I'll be sure to take this as a comment and try to add that functionality. I answered the SQL Server question. I see another question about whether or not this will be recorded. And then in terms of import, export options, this is more, so someone asked about, does Falcon support import export options? This is a part of the base Plotly functionality. So when you do click on make chart and you're importing data, CSV is an option. And when you are in Plotly, you have various export options. In terms of the Linux version, I believe there is a Linux version. Let me, I'm sorry, right now it's just for Windows and Mac, but it's, but for our previous connector, we did have a Linux version. So I imagine that's going to be, I'm pretty sure that's going to be pretty quick to come. So that is it for the questions. If I didn't address your question, feel free to contact us at support@plot.ly. So I see one more question came in here. Database upgrade, does the database upgrade impact Plotly reports? So existing Plotly reports, however you're maintaining them, they won't be impacted by Falcon. So if you want to create new reports that are existing, that are connected to SQL, then you would be able to use the SQL database connector. I'm getting a few more questions filtering in. The sandbox instance, that would be available in the GitHub repo. So this is open source, so you're able to contribute or kind of download sort of play around with the existing code. And then the question is, can you get data from multiple sources at the same time? The way to do something like this is the SQL connector connects to a grid. So when we were looking at our files, we have graphs and we have tables or grids. And it's the grid that's connected to SQL. So the way to get multiple data sources would simply be to connect multiple grids via independent connectors to different queries. And then within Plotly, you're able to create graphs from multiple grids. And if you do have any more questions about that, feel free to email support, and I could keep a watch out for those and kind of guide people through that process. All right, thank you everyone for attending, and have a nice day.